Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. Tonight's Monday, April 13th, 2015. And tonight we are having 3 committee meetings: Transportation, Planning and Development, and Finance and Personnel. We're joined by Mayor Weil and Deputy Service Safety Director Ron Lucas with us tonight, as well as members from our Athens Public Transit and our Mobility Manager Coordinator for Athens Transit and other ventures. So welcome. We'll start with Transportation Committee. Council Member Pappy serves as chair.
Thank you. This evening, short agenda for transportation, and we have a presentation by Athens Public Transit. If you'd like to come up to the podium, however you want to present that. Jessica, Michael, and Lance. We do have a packet here that was handed out before the meeting. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Stroh. For those of you guys that don't know me, it's nice to be here. And Lance Webb and Michael Lockman, who I'm sure you guys all know. I haven't been here for a while with council. It's probably been a couple of years, but I'm very excited to be here in a new role for myself at HAPCAP as a transportation director. We have a new division that was formed this past year, partly because of many of the new transportation programs that we've been doing. So it's very exciting for HAPCAP. We provided you with a little bit of an overview of all the programs that we're doing. I wanted to point out on there that we have a new logo. We're celebrating our 50 years as an organization this year. So in celebration of doing that, we rolled out a new logo, so you'll start to see that. Before we get into some information about the individual programs, I just want to mention it's been an incredible couple years for transportation. We've had across the board in all the programs in Athens County and the city increased ridership, increased revenue. All indicators are looking very positive, and Michael and Lance are going to share some of that with you. So it's very exciting, and it's very nice as the designated grantee to come up here and meet with you and be available if you have any questions at any time now or any time during the year. So before I turn it over to them, I did want to mention a few things that are going on with GoBus. As you know, we've been the designated grantee for the city of Athens since 2010, and that program has grown and expanded since then. Over the last year, we've been working on a major expansion of the GoBus, and I included in your packet a map of the new routes that we're going to be doing. There's a couple key things to note. We're going to be keeping our Cincinnati and Columbus routes. As many of you know, we've been doing that since 2010, but one of the most exciting things about the change is that the routes are now going to originate out of the city of Athens. So that is going to offer day trips to Cincinnati from Athens, to Columbus from Athens, and the Columbus route is going to be 3 times a day. So this is going to provide increased opportunities for connections at the airport, for folks to visit doctors, do shopping. We're very excited about this. We are excited about the economic development opportunity that it's going to be bringing the city and the county, our vendors hiring local folks to be driving the buses now. And this has been something that we've been working towards since we started. So we're very excited about that change. You guys have the schedules in your packets here, but the map and the schedules are all on the website too. So the new routes actually start tomorrow. We're doing kind of a soft rollout of it, so there hasn't been a lot of marketing around it yet, but we're very excited about that. Also, last month we started a new Cleveland route. This is going from Cleveland to Athens once a day, and we also started subsidizing a route that Barron's Bus has been doing from Cleveland down to West Virginia, but we're now subsidizing the Cleveland to Marietta part. And with our other route that connects from Athens to Marietta, we're actually going to be offering twice daily trips to Cleveland from Athens as well, with stops in between servicing the rural areas. So again, this is very exciting. This is taking kind of the small GoBus that started into more of a statewide effort. And so we've had some increased positions even at our agency to kind of make that happen. We're going to be taking over the 800 number, which we haven't done in the past. So lots of good things and lots more to come. There's a couple other routes that we're working on with GoBus, but I think that for residents in Athens County, this the ability to travel around the state, connect with Greyhound, connect with train stations, connect with airports is really going to offer so many mobility options, again, for healthcare and for so many other things. So we're very, very excited about that. And the only other thing I wanted to touch on is we've been involved in a project called Project Launch, which is part of a 5-year project that was going on with the Ohio Department of Health, looking at increasing health outcomes for children. One of the biggest things that they identified as a barrier is transportation. So over the last 6 months, we've been working on a committee, a regional committee of 6 counties, looking at how we can look at transportation and access to healthcare in a more regional way. And so there's lots going on with that, and we'll keep you updated with any projects, but it's a very exciting time in terms of looking at what we're doing in a broader sense regionally, which you have to do when it comes to transportation. So very excited about those things. I'm going to hand it over to Lance so he can talk about some of the mobility and coordination efforts in Athens On Demand, unless anybody has any questions about those.
Jessica, I just wanted to mention, since I sit on the Transportation Advisory Group, I've been hearing about these rollouts and the planning, and I really appreciate the planning process that your group has put into place for this, because when I see it all in paper, and I've heard the players talking about how it's going to be rolled out, it is really going to help our region, and I think that's great. I don't know if anybody else on council wanted to comment.
Oh, yes, I just think this is great that we've got the 2, or in the future, 2 runs a day to Cleveland, 3 runs a day to Columbus now. And I know that it was intended as a link primarily when GoBus first started to other transportation mechanisms, but this possibility for, healthcare is just a great opportunity. One question for you on the long-term funding for GoBus. It's been primarily federal through the state. Is that correct? And does that look fairly stable?
Yes, it looks very stable. We've recently had meetings with the Department of Transportation to talk about their long-term strategy with financing of GoBus, and I think that us doing this expansion and them backing this expansion is a sign and a commitment from the state to intercity transit in the state of Ohio for a long-term commitment to it. So it is, something that couldn't be done without partnerships with Greyhound. They provide some of the in-kind match needed to make it work, and partnerships with all of our local stops throughout now the entire state to make it work. So a lot of commitments from everybody, but the financial commitment from ODOT and from the FTA is very high for intercity transit.
Good to hear.
We are looking at changing our fare structure a little bit with this. It's all on the website, but that's part of the sustainability of the program too, is looking at fare structure. And we're going to be looking at bringing in additional revenue, potentially, maybe some advertising inside the bus, maybe even some contract revenue, because the more that we can bring in, the more we can do. So we're open to all sorts of different ideas with looking at the funding sustainability as well. So
good.
Yes. I'd just like to add my appreciation, and I'm really impressed at how GoBus has grown and expanded over its young history so far, and I really appreciate the contributions that this option is making to the sustainability of our city as well. Because, as we know, there are some in our population who need to be able to move around without using a personal vehicle, and there are some who just want to be able to move around without using a personal vehicle. And this is something that, our population has said we want to expanded public transit options both within the city and linkages between, cities, so that they can use less fossil fuels themselves when getting around. So this helps in so many different aspects. Thank you for all you're doing.
Mr. Mayor?
We own 3 of the Go buses. I'm sure there's more in process. We're probably getting towards the back end of those buses in terms of lifespan. The model now would not require more or lease them. What's the discussion on that front?
yeah, that is a great point. When the program started, the city of Athens was the one to purchase Go buses through a 100% funding option with ODOT with ARA funding. So the 3 Go buses are city-owned, and they're leased to one of the service providers, Lakefront Lines. They are starting to reach their useful life. We actually currently are having them reviewed right now just to see exactly how much longer we think we'll be able to use them. When we did the new RFP this past year, we knew that that was happening, so we opened it up to the vendors that they could either include in their bid an option to purchase new buses completely and or lease buses. And we had been collecting a service fee ourselves on some of the tickets in order to get some of the capital match that we would need to buy new buses, because you need 20% on $500,000 or so to get a brand new bus. All of our service providers bid to lease the buses. And this, it is important. We thought that that was a very good option for Go Bus, because reliability and inner city transit, the last thing you want is for buses to be breaking down. And the model that they use is they lease brand new buses every 3 years, so they're getting state-of-the-art buses, minimal maintenance issues. They both rent tires, so they're getting brand new tires all the time. Safety is our #1 priority when it comes to inner city transit, and really all public transit. And so we believe that leasing the buses as an option is much better than having to use buses until they meet their useful life, because they do start to run into major mechanical problems.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, for the record, my name is Lance Repp. I'm the mobility coordinator for Athens County. The purpose of mobility, I actually have 2 hats tonight. I'll be mobility and Athens on-demand transit. But the mobility part, I try to serve as the main contact for the county on anything that's related to mobility, transportation, and by us expanding, like Jessica said, on our transportation division, makes us pretty unique in the state of Ohio. We have the system in place to really take transit to the next level. So I'm excited about that. When I took this job in 2010, the mayor and council stepped up and helped cover the local match part, along with the county and a couple of agencies in town. And that has been very key to keeping this thing going. So I appreciate all that from everybody and prior council people to keep that going. Perfect example of what we're trying to do with mobility is Michelle's transportation task force that meets every other month, and Chris was real instrumental in keeping this thing going too. And that brings everybody together to the table, and we keep sharing ideas. And I've seen just a wealth of information supplied at those meetings, including Ohio University is coming to the table through all the MOU that the mayor has with the university. A lot of things are starting to be talked about that weren't even talked about a couple of years ago. As far as Athens on-demand transit, we started that in 2012. We're providing rides for persons with disabilities and elderly needing medical appointments. And I think, from last year when I talked to everyone, I didn't think we could grow much more, but we were up 43% last year. Over 8,000 people with disabilities and elderly, got rides that, quite frankly, were really tough to supply rides without that service. Spatially accessible transportation. Other than if you live right here in the city and you can get on one of our city buses, you better have somebody that's a family or a vehicle that can help transport you. We're up 27% first quarter this year already. One of the issues we have is we're near capacity. A lot of our long-term scheduling is pretty full. I have another vehicle coming, but like anything else, it's all based on funding, and you've got to have people that drive and everything else. It's interesting that just destination breakdowns, 25% of our rides were for medical, 11 for human health services, jobs and family services, children's services, those kind of rides, 9.6% for groceries, and 43% was for work, which means a lot of our DD community, we've expanded the window that they can work. Before, it was always like from about 9 to 2:30. Now we work in the evenings and on Saturdays. So that's really helped that part of our population. The other thing that's interesting, there was 8,068 rides for the year. 3,970 rides. The destination was Athens from outside the county. So people are coming to Athens. We hope spending a little money, but they're also, taking care of very important projects for them. Cliff Warren was one of the people that was our supervisor and helped me get this started. And Cliff has moved on. He's with Lakefront now, and he's actually still associated with the Go Bus. So he's still part of the overall program. Jody Hart has taken his place. Jody's been with our agency about 14 years. So she's been here about 2 weeks or so. So she's doing very well already. Some of the challenges facing Athens On Demand are similar to some of the overall transit issues the state has been talking about through their transit needs study. We have a real unmet need problem here in our county, and even within the city, is that more and more people need our service. And I always tell everybody that everybody in this room needs some type of mobility issue before in their lifetime. And the other thing is the average person now lives 7 to 9 years past their ability to drive. So we need to start catching up with transit to be able to handle this in the future. We're working several programs that we're working on to get sustainability going. I know there's some similarities with Michael's Athens Public Transit that may be able to work real with Athens On Demand Transit. So Michael and Jessica and I are working on that. If you know somebody that needs a ride, it's athensondemand.com, or just call down there. And it's really heartwarming. There's a young girl brought her mom in this morning, and we sat down with the mom, and she lives pretty much across the street from our offices, and all she wants to do is be able to get to the community center. But she was very, very unsure of herself, and it was reassuring to see the young daughter trying to take care of her mom and have the confidence that we would do it in a professional and safe manner. So those kind of things make it all worthwhile. So, anybody got any questions on Athens On Demand? Or?
I have a question. I know we have new buses coming that have the low deck on them. Do you anticipate that helping at all with your load? I mean, having the demand that you have is a great thing, although, like you said, you're stretching.
One of the things that we've noticed is that Athens Public Transit, our rides for accessible rides, for the ramps, wheelchairs, and all that stuff, it's at least even or up. So Athens On Demand is not hurting that. And some of the reason is that some people just cannot negotiate on their own from their house down to the street corner, get on a bus, and I know we deviate, but that's part of the reason. I think there's just a demand for everything, and it's kind of complementing each other. And so Michael can talk more about the low bus, but we have one more accessible van coming by later this summer. So.
That's great.
Well, again, thanks for all your support.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add, again, thank you for your work in this, and thank you for making accessibility valid and important in our community. We all know that we're only temporarily able-bodied, and I appreciate that you're trying to help us plan and prepare for the future. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
that.
You're welcome.
Michael?
Michael?
Well, I'm Michael Lockman. I'm the manager for Athens Public Transit, and it's a real pleasure to be here tonight again. And there's a lot of exciting things in the particular program that I'm with that we're doing too, so I'll try to fill you in. To begin with, we had a month of March record month ridership. We track ridership month by month. On our city routes, we just missed 8,000 rides by 7 rides. So we're at 7993. 8,000 is a big month milestone anytime we hit that. And total with our summit service was 29,824. So that continues to be very strong. As well as that, our first quarter fare box revenue was up 12% from last year. And it was up 25% from 2012, back when we had the $1.50 fare. So I think we're getting pretty good evidence at this point in time that taking the fare down again to the flat dollar has really been a good choice. The coin is clanging in our fare box as a result of that. One thing from a little earlier on that I'd really like to plug, you may have all gotten this information by email some time ago, but I participated in the Ohio Statewide Transit Needs Study last year, and one of the things that was part of that study was that it was really important that transit be measured with really solid metrics, that we get benchmarks of how we were performing. And so using the benchmarks that were in that study, I sat down and I looked at our 2013 year, which is the last year that we have comparative data with other transit systems in Ohio. And the news was really exciting. I think the most exciting stat that we came up with was that of all the 61 systems, urban and rural, we were the most cost efficient per trip provided. And that's including systems like Cleveland and Columbus that might seem that they have much bigger, better economies of scale. So I think that we have a lot to be proud of here. I think another thing on that sheet that is really one that jumps out at me is that our per capita ridership was very high, certainly compared to most of our rural peers and even compared to the big boys. So Athens is a town that likes to take the bus. And personally, that makes me pretty happy. One thing I want to thank you all about this time last year, you took a real leap of faith in pledging city funding for the JARC program route expansion that we did. And that yielded eventually the Route 6 and Route 5 expansion that we just put into place this February, started up February 2nd. I'm happy to report that we've had just under 1,400 rides in the 2 months. In spite of pretty severe winter weather, people have jumped on that. And there's also some really great stories that I'm getting from people. So I've heard a couple of people say that they have friends that are moving from the outer reaches of the county or outside the county to Chansey because it's along a bus route now. And I just had a phone call last week that a gentleman called me up and asked me, is this going to continue next year? And the reason that he wanted to know is that he'd been work commuting on the bus, which is exactly what we designed that project for. And he was about to invest in a 1-year pass, but he wanted to make sure that his 1-year pass was going to be good for that time. So we're getting real good feedback that route has been something that's needed in the community, that people are using it. So thank you again for taking that leap of faith on that.
Michael, while you're on that, how are you doing with picking up some other funding from these other sources? You know, we kind of took the leap of faith as the city. Are, you know, any of the health organizations or any of those other organizations kind of stepping up? Or
so far, I think the main conversation that we're continuing to have is with County Job and Family Services, and they've really been supportive. Bob Gallagher, who's the new director, is really on board. He's had good experiences with transit in Chillicothe, where he was previously director. And they actually, on the Athens On Demand transit side, have recently contributed some additional money to Lance's budget. So they're really, I think they're committed to being a partner.
Okay.
You know, it's interesting that there's kind of a segue into the discussion about the low-floor vehicles that Steve was talking about earlier. We are out there actively beating the bushes right now for private donors on that project to make up the additional funding gap. And I think we have some good leads. There's some questions right now of timing different organizations' funding cycles and how they match up with the purchase. But I'll have more information for you soon, I hope.
Okay.
And yeah.
And just a question then on the, just background information for the audience, that the JARC program is Jobs Access Reverse Commute?
You have a
Something
stellar
like that?
memory, Chris. Yes, the Job Access Reverse Commute program.
Okay, and its purpose being federal money coming through the Department of Transportation to help our rural community with people who wouldn't be able to maybe keep a job or get to a job
Exactly.
without the transportation. So that's wonderful news to hear all this, so thank you.
I've got another infrastructure project that I'm happy to report on. We, after a multi-year process, are about to send out contracts for some bus shelters. The mayor is laughing. This has been on the table for a long time. You know, one of the things that I think that has been an unintended positive about waiting this long is that in the interim time, we've had this fantastic Essence of Athens plan that's come along. And we had a chance to run the shelters in our selection through that process, get some feedback from Paul and from Andy Stone. And I think we have some opportunity going forward once we install them even to go back to that plan and add some ideas in terms of creative ways to design and landscape around the shelter that's there. So those, if all goes well, should be arriving early this summer, I think. We also have a special ODOT grant project that is coming up, and there's some benches at bus stops that don't have shelters that we'll be able to install as part of that grant. Two more things on here that I wanted to give updates on. Some of you are probably familiar with the double map bus tracking service that we launched at the beginning of this year. That has proven to be very successful, and I see people out all the time now on their phone checking to see where the bus is. We had early in the process some great PSAs that Scott did and put up on the government channel. So again, I feel like there's been good city support in that endeavor.
And can you quickly remind us that app name and
Double Map.
Double
Yes.
Map? And
Go
that's
to
the app.
athens.doublemap.com, where you can download an app on either an Android or an iOS system.
And this is a great app, especially when there's inclement weather. Weather's bad.
Yeah.
So instead of someone having to trek all the way down to a bus, bus stop, and soon to have bus shelters in some stops, that they can sit and kind of maximize their time and sit and know, okay, it's coming, so now I'll go out into the weather, and as opposed to what it used to be, you just kind of stood out there and you waited.
Exactly.
So this is great.
Yeah, it's a real game changer.
Go ahead. You want to wait? Go ahead.
Well, and Michael, while you mentioned the Essence of Athens, and maybe this is a miniature side discussion track on the RAPs. I don't know if that's something that you're able to discuss briefly or mention, the poetry
Sure, I
wraparound
can touch
the
briefly
bus.
on that. We took a project before the AMAC, the Municipal Arts Commission, to put a poetry wrap around and inside the bus, and it was pretty well received at AMAC. We're trying to move forward towards producing one of these. We've hit some roadblocks, but I think that we're on track to do it sometime in the near future. Yeah, I'll try to keep council updated on how that proceeds.
Thank you. Thank you.
The last thing I had was that there's an event coming up that we're doing in conjunction with the Job and Family Services and Ohio Means Jobs Job Fair. That's going to be on the 22nd. We're holding a press conference. Mayor Weil will be there. Bob Gallagher is going to be there. And the 22nd, as many of you know, also happens to be Earth Day. And so in the context of having the new Route 6 and being able to partner with JFS and thinking about some of the sustainability issues that Jennifer was bringing up, we're just using that as a chance to highlight many of these contributions that transit makes to our community and how they all fit together in terms of human services bottom lines, economic bottom lines, environmental bottom lines. So I thought I'd show this off for the television audience. We have a T-shirt design that we've made that we're going to be making some T-shirts for the event. We're going to be handing these out, and it's also going to be one of our free ride days that day on the bus.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, that is all I have at the moment. Any other questions?
Mayor?
Well, Steve first.
Steve?
I think this is all great. I mean, and hearing these numbers being up, especially the new route, the one that goes to Chansey, that's exciting and great news because, you know, it was, no one really kind of knew how that was going to turn out. So it sounds like that's a big positive. I'm looking at some of the other programs or services on here, and I noticed there's the Logan Public Transit, which goes to Nelsonville from Logan, which is an interesting thing. So that raises the question for me, and that is that there's kind of a missing link in here, which I think would be great to start exploring, and that would be to have regular service that maybe extends beyond Chansey from Athens and heads to Nelsonville. And especially, Jessica, was something you mentioned earlier, which is the health aspect of it, and especially children's health. You know, we have things like Kids on Campus here in the city of Athens. The other thing I often think about is the city of Athens has the bulk of the hotels for major events such as the Nelsonville Music Festival, and if we could sit there and reduce traffic flow that's going from Athens to Nelsonville and vice versa. And I don't know the numbers, but I would wager to say that a lot of the people who live in Nelsonville work in the city of Athens. And so it'd be great to start exploring something like that.
I agree. Any other
Mayor?
questions?
A couple things. First of all, realized a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, I think it was 2012, I think 3 years ago, we cleaved off 1% of the income tax to put towards transit. And I thank council for putting that commitment in there, a steady commitment. When you talk about expanding service, of course, there will be extra costs, so you must be aware of that. I would hope that we would continue to fund, again, most of these programs require our skin in the game, so to speak, so I hope we continue to fund the mobility coordinator, because we will have to do that. Coming up for the JARC grant will be another mix as well. So I know the 1% may be adequate at times, it may not be, so you, in the back of your mind, don't hesitate to add funds as they're needed, because things will come up there. We'll have a chance to either to take a jump or leverage some more funds at that point. I'm on year 8 of my term. I keep getting people coming up to me and say, what are you proud of the most? And most of the time I'm saying public transit. And usually what I say is that's because I was able to let go on it and let HAPCAT deal with this, who are much better at it than I will ever be. I'm serious. I mean, you know, it's coming out of my office, what can I do? Just a little bit. But, you know, Michael, Lance, and Jessica have all shown their abilities. We've given them more as time goes on, hopefully not too much. At the same time, it's something I think we can be proud of. Occasionally there is pushback when people say, you know, why are you servicing outside the city limits? But the fact is we are a region, and it's helpful for us to realize that we are a community that goes beyond our city limits. So that's my pitch, essentially, is that I think it's very important for us to continue this. I'm glad that everybody we supported at this point, and I hope we continue to support it. You know, and public transit, you know, and I say I'm proud of that. I'm proud of bike lanes and et cetera, et cetera. But this is one thing I think is very important to have. So thank you guys for doing a great job making it look good.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would add on to that, that when you go to the regional meetings and we see these statistics from around the state, where does Athens pop up? But right there. So that's a testament, too, to making something in a rural area like ours, you know, it's advancing the cause, so to speak, and also letting people know that we have some pretty dedicated and people who can figure out how to do this, maybe on a little bit less, maybe with difficult situations to have to put together. So that's a statement that goes farther than just right here in Athens. So that's very much appreciated as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Do we have any other agenda items for the Transportation Committee?
No, thank you.
Question, is there any input from the street tour or infrastructure tour that I should know about? I believe most of you attended, right?
Can we want to wait till the end, or?
part of
Well, I assume a good line share was transportation.
Transportation.
In terms
It
of
was. I will say one thing that I learned. I asked Andy Stone, our Engineer and Public Works Director, the issues with the paint on the streets. And I don't know if everyone recalled what he said, but part of it has to do with
They're water-based.
their water-based paint, and part of that is because so much we're in the flood, or in the wellhead protection, and all of that. And so I just think that's a general public, because a lot of the general public will say, why can't we keep our paint on the streets? And so I think we're probably constantly looking for new products that meet our sustainability efforts and our wellhead protection regulations. So that was an interesting comment on that. We have some interesting projects coming up in the future. I think the Stimson Avenue corridor is very large, as well as some of the infrastructure issues that will continue to move forward. We all know that the East State Street's probably the next largest project coming forward in terms of impact on the city. We have some other large projects coming up, but in terms of impact to most residents of Athens, I would say the East State Street, after Richland Avenue is completed, is probably the next biggest issue. Other members of council, comments?
I don't really have anything that came up in particular. I had to leave the ride early. However, what I do want to share, that I don't think the citizens of Athens completely, certainly don't recognize, nor do they possibly even understand, but Andy Stone, engineer Andy Stone, took us down to the depot area and showed us that whole riparian work that's gone on with one of our larger storm drain effluents in the city, as well as down by Depot. There's also a couple of the vortexes, and he was explaining those in the rock garden that appears to be a rock garden, but is actually a storm drain runoff system, catch system basin. And as he put it, he goes, these aren't sexy things, but I was there looking at these, but these are certainly things that the citizens of Athens need to be aware of, that these are projects that are being funded and moving forward. That's vital for us with EPA, having their eyes on what's going on in the region with our storm water system and storm drain program. So it was interesting to learn what we learned on that particular element of the trip.
And again, I would say that those are efforts of many different groups. Soil and Water is involved with that, and it's a sustainability type of issue. There's just different groups that come together. I think the wisdom in putting the Engineering Public Works under one roof and one person, I think, has really made a huge difference in this city. Over the last few years. I think that there was a lot of wisdom in that decision to do that, because everything kind of flows together now in terms of the projects and leveraging funds and all of that.
I wasn't able to go on the tour, but just recalling earlier tours, it used to be the street tour, and then changing that concept as Engineering and Public Works became a department, as you merged department. And looking at all the infrastructure projects is really important. So we are able to look at the major projects going on around the city, the ones planned for the future that you've mentioned, the Richland East State, the Stimson, but then you also have, the city has, in the immediate, preparing for summer repair of roads with potholes, and he takes an inventory that's using an engineering criteria to determine which are the worst streets. And you put that all together, and Public Works is also working with a long-term plan that council members have looked at a draft before, and very much, I think council members are supportive of that, that long-term plan, looking at all of the big infrastructure and streets and water and sewer projects in the city. So it's a good overview opportunity. I'm sorry,
I think
missed
the
it
long-term
this year.
plan is excellent. That's an excellent point again, because I know early on being a council member, I needed a vision in terms of the allocation of funds and what we were looking at, and having that document and having something like that certainly helps us in terms of knowing what to do, and then responding to constituents as well in terms of, yes, the idea is in a few years, or whatever the date is, we're going to be working on that project, and I think that's really helpful.
Okay. As I said, I wasn't able to make it, so I was just wondering how it went with you guys. And again, the plan is important because when we choose grants, they'll say, well, did you just make this up today? And it's, no, it's been in the works for a few years.
That's exactly right. Jennifer, did you?
I was just going to add that one reminder that our service safety director pointed out to us as we were driving down Richland Avenue is that we really need people to slow down as they're using Richland Avenue. If you can avoid it, please do. If you can't avoid it, if you live out there, if you work out there and you need to be on Richland Avenue, just slow down for the safety of everyone involved.
15-mile-per-hour zone.
Good point. 15 miles per hour. Thank you.
The other excellent point, we all kind of ended up at the end of the day at the sewer treatment plant. And, a huge, huge project, and I think Mr. Stone was right in saying not many people ask about this project.
No, they don't.
But talk about an important project, and there the river was at, very high, 19, 20 feet the river was at, and they were working their machines to take care of, a very important issue in the city that we don't really think about. And then we, of course, saw the whole plans and where we're headed and what's going on, and maybe people will appreciate the sewer treatment facility when it's all done with. It's exceptional.
Well, the hope is there's some artwork. They'll appreciate that.
Yes.
And it is an $18 million project that doesn't get a lot of...
Doesn't get a lot of press.
Yeah, but we interact with almost every day.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yep. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we'll move on to Planning and Development Committee with Councilperson Fall serving as chair.
Thank you. Tonight, I wanted to bring forward for discussion a special event permit process that we've been working on, Michelle and Lisa, our law director, and I have been working on for the past couple months. This has actually been talked about, fairly every time big events come up, and it's always kind of something that we talk about. Maybe what I want to start the discussion is the purpose of the chapter that would be the special event permit. The purpose of this chapter is to create a uniform and fair process for the safe and orderly implementation of special events which utilize city infrastructure, assets, personnel. This chapter balances the needs of special events while protecting the public health, safety, and welfare, which goes to directly what we need to do in the city. As evidenced a couple last council meeting, currently, in order to do a special event, such as Brew Week or International Street Fair, you come to council and you have to go through this process. And council goes and writes and reads a certain number of ordinances to put the festival forward. Not only that, the service safety director and the chief of police and fire look at plans to ensure the public safety. And one thing is with this permit process, is to gather it all together in a whole process that's orderly and it's all together, and it won't get mixed up with, whoops, we didn't pass something, or it just makes it so that everything is there to be looked at and reviewed in a logical process. So basically, a special event are performances, festivals, those sort of, street music, Brewfest, Boogie on the Bricks, Numberfest, if it was in the city, in the city, that would have impact on the city services or, infrastructure. It doesn't include things like parades, private individual events, or people renting the community center or something like that. So it's really trying to get to these specific events that we always are always talking about. There's a list of requirements that one has to put in when they put the permit in, and it covers everything from health and safety issues, ingress, egress, sanitation, which is an issue. Also things such as impact on the local neighborhoods. If you're going to have music, what type of music, how is it amplified, how are you going to deal with the, making sure it doesn't overly impact people. What are the vending, and if you have alcohol served, how is it going to be served? Do you have the right permits? And those sort of things. Also, it goes to cover, make sure that people who are putting these events on are covered by liability insurance or bond, and also, workers' compensation, and also hold the city non-liable for any accidents that might occur during such events. And, many of these things, if you're going to present an event, these are the things that you need to think about anyway. And if somebody comes forward and hasn't thought about it, then it's a good process to remind them that they do have to think about these. So it's a way of making sure that people are planning for the health and safety of not only the participants, but also of the city in general. Also, some of the other special parts of this is it will help to, if there's too many festivals that have been applied for one day, it will help to maybe make those, either prioritize them based on when they have been applied for, the permit had been applied for, or maybe a historical event such as the street fair. Because when we are getting 2 and 3 and 4 festivals and projects and all this stuff going on, our services are really thin. And we just had a discussion with the fire, with the police about personnel and those sort of things. So this is also helping to ensure that the health and safety of the community is protected. And lastly, I'd like to point out that when a organization comes forward, let's just throw it out there. Let's say Numberfest was in the city, and they have a huge impact. They have an impact. Unfortunately, they're out of the city, so our impact is kind of gratis. But they come forward, and there are certain things that they need to provide. They need to provide sanitation that has been approved, the different vending applications, make sure those are all okay, beer permits, also security. And it isn't the job of Athens City Police to run private security for these sort of festivals. Halloween is different. That's sponsored by the city. It's a city due, so we take it on as a city responsibility. So this is also trying, because if you do not provide enough security or there's concerns about health and safety, then the permit process would allow for the city to charge for police, fire, street closures, the time it takes to hook up electricity and those sort of things. And that's to protect the taxpayers. In a lot of ways, sometimes you look at it as festivals, they think that they can privatize the profit and socialize the costs. And that's happened in the past. And so this is a way to try to make it a process that's straightforward, fair, and very transparent.
So I would just like to add that this, what we're proposing here, didn't just appear. We looked at other cities in the state of Ohio who have these. All the major cities have these ordinances and have permitting that goes along, and Athens did not have any permitting. So we started looking through those, and then actually I want to give real kudos to our new law director. She was very detailed and helpful in going through step by step and really vetting the entire process to see how it would work. So I think that's a real plus that we had in working through this. And I want to thank my fellow council member, Ms. Fall, because this is a very detailed type of ordinance to flesh out. So, Steve?
A couple questions that came to mind for me. Would an event such as Halloween, since it is city sanctioned, would they pay the $100 permit
No,
fee as well?
In the definitions and such, the city is exempt from doing a permit.
What is, I'm sorry, Mary, I think you have the same question.
To tell you the truth, I never really considered Halloween sponsored by the city. So
I misspoke.
if I look through the lens of this, I would say this would be quite a few hoops for a clean, safe Halloween committee to jump through. There'll be a learning curve on this with any new legislation. The next question would be, what about the Halloween for Ayuba? Is that sponsored by the city? I don't, again, we don't do insurance.
The law directors indicated that that would be considered a parade.
A parade?
Yes.
But you realize parades do cost money in terms of police at
Right.
every intersection.
Right.
Okay.
But this particular legislation, like most of the legislation in the state, exempt parades.
Okay, and how about, we just went to the Susan G. Komen Race for a Cure, and that's coming up in October. It's going to be on bike path and on city streets. Is that a parade as well? Because there'll be 1,000, maybe 1,000 people?
Up to 1,000, maybe more.
Right. Well, that would be a permit. I mean,
That would require this.
well, without going through the permit process, do they just show up? I mean, I would,
For a parade, they have 30 days to put a parade permit in place.
you see, there is a parade
But-
permit already.
There is a parade.
So,
Okay,
that's
so you already
covered.
have a series of things that you go through for the parade
Correct.
permit.
Okay, I'm just trying to work out the case scenarios. Again, when
Right.
you say we're sponsoring Halloween, most of the time,
Well,
that's not on my horizon.
Yes.
I don't think it's
I guess the question is what is considered city sponsorship of an event? Is it providing resources in the street closures to pre-existing events that have been happening for years? Or is it all events that we have, are we going to go through a permit process and the city is going to be donating money as a sponsorship? So what is considered a sponsorship?
well, I
is my
think
question.
that's going to be a definition that, as the city needs to identify. I think of there's certain fests or festivals that are completely, you could not say in any way or imagination that they're not privately put on, like Numberfest. That's, a for-profit, even though they donate some money, it's still a corporation that puts it on, a promoter, and this and that. But something like, Bounty on the Bricks would be considered a nonprofit. They have a lower permit costs, and, if they're getting all their people by volunteer, then, and the city could decide to also provide some of its operating costs as a donation. So there's some things that, because of the type of event, you can't do, there's certain, like Bounty on the Bricks and International Street Festival and Boogie on the Bricks, they almost do everything by volunteer. And they don't have huge issues with police and public safety.
But I would agree that they still should go through the permitting process. And I will say on Halloween that I've had several Court Street businesses say to me, why don't we have a permitting process for Halloween and recoup some of those funds? Now, no way could the permitting process recoup that. But I think it legitimizes, and it also gives people an idea of step by step what it is the city of Athens expects when you want to have an event, whether it's a for-profit or a not-for-profit event. It's an expectation. It's a set of expectations.
I agree. I think what we've had in the past, well, I know what we've had in the past is our sponsorship for an event such as Boogie and the Bricks has been street closure. So we would go through the motions, we would go through the council ordinance process and get the street closed and go through all those things. And then this event is also sponsored by XXX City of Athens, and that sponsorship was basically the city providing personnel to clean up and things like that. if that were the case, if that were considered a sponsorship, it wouldn't require a permit, according to this.
Because we're adding,
Okay, yeah,
You know,
I
you know
see,
what I'm saying?
right. Well, I guess the thing is.
Or it's an
um,
in-kind donation.
An in-kind donation. I guess one of the issues is, what I kind of get when people come forward is also they expect certain things. You know, free parking. Well, we had to pop that bubble. You know, and it's just that every time, you know, and there's more festivals. I mean, we didn't have Bounty on the Bricks until a couple years ago. And so it's also trying to make everybody go through the process so we can identify, you know, and it may be that certain definitionals, which we can work with Lisa to put into the ordinance, looking at whether, you know, an in-kind donation. But the idea is that we're not going to, with how it's written, we're not going to charge for every single thing. But when the health and safety issues start rising to the top, then you need to make sure either the festival hires the security and sanitation crews that they should be, or if they don't want us to hire them, then they can hire the city. Because, you know, we shouldn't be responsible for, you know, certain things. So, Mike?
If I'm hearing correctly, you're saying that you're going to be able to pick and choose which event or what you're going to use this on? Because I think you run into trouble if you do that.
Right. No, the things that are, and I think that we need to define sponsorship better, which is, that's a great point. Profit and nonprofit need to apply for the permit. And there's a different fee for a nonprofit versus a profit. And there are certain requirements that trigger the permit. So, but everybody, except for, you know, fully city-sponsored things, you know. So that's a definition that we will include. I will work with Lisa on defining that better.
so International Street Fair will have to go through this process. Cruising will have to go through this process. Boogie on the Bricks, Brew Week, Cruisins.
They all will.
Well, they have to go through some process anyway.
Yes, they do.
Yes. So
I suspect some of them will have a stalling point at one point or another. Probably with the insurance to be one, but I'm not sure. I'm just asking clarification here,
Right.
because we're going to have to paint this one way or the other and see how it applies.
But it doesn't, the town, I mean, it makes sense for due diligence that we look at liability and such.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the parameters, that's all.
I mean, I think as our festivals, some things have changed over time. And I think our last Halloween, we had some events occur that, in terms of health and safety, could have gone a whole lot differently. And that can happen in any large event or a small event. But I don't know, just the idea of having a legitimizing an event with a process, with a vetting process, I think is important, and we've never really had that. We've had, yes, you have to fill something out to have a parade or whatever, but this is obviously much more detailed in terms of what our expectations are for the city.
You know, in theory, I like this idea that you have. I think maybe one way to help alleviate a lot of what's going on, like with cruise-ins, I think that maybe if there was a fast tracking system, because you're answering some simple questions, and no, I don't need power hookups on the street, no, I'm not going to have vendors, I would just like to have the street closed down for a cruise-in or something of that nature, to where it's going through and not becoming onerous. One of the other things I look at in this, because I've seen it with some of the city events during the summer, is that there's, I think, more city resources that come into play than I think meets the eye. It rises to a level of consciousness, i.e., again, having an electrician running up and down and providing power for vendors that are inside this area. It's something that I might recommend even having an element like that in there, because I look at the $100 fee, and even the $25 fee for vendors that's in there is you know,
Well,
I don't know that would cover the hourly rate of
No,
someone.
actually, you know, after vetting and after the, Most of the applications that I saw for a permit, they were 1 or 2 pages. With, for a cruise-in, it would definitely be only, 1 or 2 pages with a small map, just like, Bounty on the Bricks. They provide maps already. A big festival, Numberfest, Biker Fest, those sort of things possibly could happen out at the fairgrounds. It would be more involved. You're dealing with much larger crowds, longer period of time. Now, the thing with providing services, if the city is providing those services for something like that, then there will be a charge in one of the sections in Section D. Says basically the service safety director can determine the special event will require city services. So maybe they have 50 vendors that all need electricity and they don't want to provide it, then we can charge them. And there's a lot of the cities have a set hourly fee that they will, have a separate worksheet that they put out, and they say, your charge for the people that you're going to have work at this is X amount of dollars. And
the way I was reading that is that we being the Service Safety Director's office, would develop a worksheet with the services provided, and we would work that out.
And I have some models,
Okay.
I forget, Dublin has like just a sheet, it's a pay sheet, and they can tell how many people, and that way the costs to the city are identified. Now maybe because it's a grand event like the International Street Festival, which have been going on for however many years, the city decides to donate in kind because it's not 7,000 man hours, because it's relatively easy and most of them are volunteers. But something like a major, huge, 25,000 person festival is completely different. So, Chris?
I have
Question.
Go ahead.
Athens County Fair, how would that fit in? Would they have to get a permit?
It's their own, on their own turf, they don't need it.
Yeah, but they're in the city. They have to come through the city to get to their turf. Okay.
But it rights away.
We've looked at that. They are their own entity unto themselves.
I understand that, but nonetheless, they are within the city they have to bring their stuff into the city. They have to use city resources. I'm just asking this.
Well, no, we're not closing down a street. We're not getting police there to direct the carousels.
I don't know who directs traffic on some of those heavy nights. There is some serious traffic backup. Do we put police out there?
Sometimes we do on Derby night.
But
or Tractor Pull.
because we looked at this, and Lisa proctored this fairly intensively, and there's the fair and the fair board is a whole power unto themselves, even if they're in the city.
We do use police for like some of the games at OU, though. Does that?
And they're also power upon themselves.
So if there was a huge event at the Convocation Center, let's say a concert, in the old days, they used to have concerts there, didn't they? But I don't see that that's happened.
That was a long time ago.
I know our city police do help when we have a large sporting events. That's kind of an in-kind memorandum of understanding, I think, or something. But
that's one thing, is that you can also say the university is already pulling their share because they have their own police department, and they put police towards our events too. And so that's and they're also in Ohio Revised Code. They're also law unto themselves. So there's certain things that we can't do.
Yeah, and I think I agree with what Chris just said. Is that we have a mutual aid agreement with OU Police Department anyway, so that we trade back and forth with them. And I think I'm correct on that too.
That's correct.
Chris?
Am I understanding that Halloween, at this point, we're unclear whether it's considered a city-sponsored event or not? Or
Well, I think that sponsorship, the idea of how you define sponsorship.
is what
we are listed on the
clarify.
event as a sponsor, but we don't give money to the Athens Clean and Safe Halloween Committee.
And yet our costs,
But our services
our
are...
costs for Halloween are $65,000, and the costs for the university are $65,000. I will share with you that we went to Keene, New Hampshire, that had a pumpkin festival, has one. They've had one every year for 20 years or so, I think, maybe. And they draw in a crowd of 50,000 that had more difficulties this year, particularly on campus. They had a nonprofit sponsoring organization like the Clean and Safe Halloween that came up with sponsorships and pays for the costs every year. The cost this year was $90,000. And ultimately, the city said, who's going to pay? And long-term, the university paid the fee for the damage, the overtime, but their city council closed down the Pumpkin Festival. They will not be having it. So just something to look at as we consider the sponsorships and the definitions. I very much like the fact of us moving towards a more consistent kind of policy so that we can share that with people as they're considering having events here. But there's a very real cost, and that's my long-term concern. Do we want to spend $65,000 on Halloween, or would we want to spend part of that on more road repair?
Or identify the costs in a transparent way so that maybe it can become more professional on the level of sponsorships and such.
Okay.
That's something that's going to have to be looked at in the future through this process. This isn't going to be bingo and we're going to do it tomorrow.
There's a sponsorship for more security, or there's a sponsorship, however you decide that. It formalizes.
Right. So, Steve?
Yeah, I really like the idea of having a clause in here that speaks, I think, more thoroughly about in-kind contribution, because one of the things I often think about, we've just discussed previously months ago about the parking garage and the issue there, and saying, we're going to continue to give away the parking garage for events. But you often think about a street closing as well. The street closing is now, there's no revenue being generated for parking services by taking those parking meters off, which that's a pretty sizable amount that is coming off. Another question I have, though, which is, I might be getting too far into the weeds, but it's something that popped into my head, is would an event on Court Street that closes down, who cares, 2 blocks of Court Street, and also decides within now this area that they have closed down, wants to have a little parade as one of the elements within that event, would they also have to get a parade permit, or is the street closing umbrella over anything that goes on inside that space?
That's something that could be done on the permit process, right? Are you planning on having a parade, as part of the check here, then you don't have to get a permit, parade permit.
Just curious.
That could be one of those, that's how you write the actual application. And some of them are 2 and 3 pages, others are, so that's something that could be put on it. Because I know that there are parades that. Other questions?
If we could either modify the definition of special event, or in section 2, special event does not include some of the things that we were talking about, the Athens County Fair, university sporting events.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So just be more specific.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that.
This will be in effect by the time Halloween comes through, both the Ayuba one as well as the major size one, right?
Yeah, Halloween's going to be problematic. It may be that this pushes the process forward to trying to get it to be more of a self-generating event, funding-generated event. But that's not going to happen next year, nor, I want to expect it.
We tried a beer garden.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, but it's getting people to think about it, and it's also, identifying our costs out front, so.
And I know that, for instance, the Halloween event, they tried 3 stages. That wasn't financially feasible. It didn't work from security purposes, all the way around. So, these events do wax and wane over time in terms of what seems to work and what doesn't. So I think, having a process like this just really gets people thinking about what we as a city put forward, as Steve said, in kind or whatever.
Steve?
Might I throw out a friendly suggestion, and that is that we do something similar to that which we did with the trash can ordinance, and
have a soft
and have
rollout.
this go into effect starting, January 1 of 2016, therefore getting through all this year's, because some events will have taken place, and I can see some going, well, what is this affecting me now?
Yeah,
We're
I
talking
wouldn't
big
expect
events.
this to be, in place with everything done, before January.
Or do a soft rollout on one of the biggest events like Halloween,
Yeah.
as just kind of a soft rollout to see how it worked and what kind of quirks, because not everybody who's involved with that is sitting here in this room or whatever, and I don't know.
I did send this out to several of the departments, and that's fine. Yes.
I had one more little
Yeah.
teeny tiny question.
Okay, just a teeny tiny one.
No permit issued under this section may authorize the operation of a special event for a period longer than 2 calendar days. And I
Right.
know that Paul and I worked to.
Well, it was originally 4.
Yeah,
I
so
think-
what if an event would come that would utilize the park or something, one of the parks
Right.
instead?
Like a circus.
Or like GoBus.
Or,
Yeah, something
Yeah.
something that's going to be a 3 or 4 day thing.
okay.
I don't know what the best thing to do with this would be, but maybe, I don't know, maybe that would be its own special permit or something.
Well, maybe there's a process. I'll ask Lisa.
Because I don't want to have a lot of those,
No.
a lot of 5-day events, but, there may be something coming through like GOBA every few years
Right.
that would be something that we would be interested in hosting.
Right. And that may be one of the times that a variance is voted on by council or something. So,
We usually get pretty far in advance when they plan on
Yeah,
on
they-
coming
they're-
through.
they're usually
Does
about a year
everybody
in
know
advance.
what that is? That's the bike,
Great Ohio Bike
Bus.
Adventure.
right.
In the past, Ayuba's Halloween, we did not close the streets. We closed the streets because of safety, I believe, with our will to do that. Conceptually, you could have somebody say, we don't want to do that, let's leave the streets open, let's have our uptown Halloween anyway. So just, and again, I'm just trying to look at all the different examples we have where we close the streets and...
well, but if that's defined as a permit, as a parade, that's what Lisa's.
The Uptown Business Association Halloween is a parade.
Yes.
The trick or treat
The-
uptown is
The
a
trick or
parade.
treat.
It's a parade
Under the legal definition, I think.
Legal.
because they
definition.
walk up and down the street like the regular Halloween. Oh,
Yes.
Interesting.
I'm learning things all the time now.
And in the greater scheme of things, those sort of things are, that's the small potatoes. It's more the large ones that we're concerned about, continually concerned about coming in and having big blowouts that just impact us. And I don't want to spend my, people's tax money on,
Every time you close the street, it costs money.
yeah.
So,
And some, for certain things, it's reasonable, it's fair, it's reasonable, doesn't have a huge impact, but, if you have, I guess my vision of is if Numberfest was in the city, and that's the thing that I tried to capture most of, because that would just cost a huge chunk of change. I don't want to pay for it, so.
Yeah.
So, and they're making lots of money. They should, pay for it. Personally, I think that the county should probably look at something like this too.
Just one question. If this is a permitting process, then it's implicit that a permit can be denied.
Yep.
There is an
There's a
appeal
whole
process.
section on denying the permit.
At the end.
Second last
At the end.
page.
To include an appeals process as well.
Well, I didn't get a copy, so I don't know.
It should be on your,
Well, it was
Chromebook.
forwarded to me later, but I don't have it, so I'm just guessing.
Well, no, there's terms and conditions, and then there's rationale for denial, and also rationale for, revoking.
I seem to recall, what is a misdemeanor of the 4th degree? What is that exactly? You know the number? I mean, basically, can somebody just pay it and say it's part of my fee and let's go?
Oh, I guess they could, but I don't think the
$250,
next year they want to do it.
$250 for a Numberfest. Wow, that's cheap.
Yes, but the thing, you
Maybe
could
you
do
can be
that.
cited more than one time.
Yeah. It is a per day.
All it takes is one time.
Also, part of the approval process, there are conditions about behaving yourself the year before, if this is a continual. You know, I don't think that the approval process would be nearly as easy if you kind of flaked out on the last one. So, I mean, yeah, people can do it. There's always ways of finding cheap ways of doing it. You hope people are responsible.
Okay, and again, the Ayubu Uptown Halloween, I do not see as a parade, so I have trouble saying that we're going to give them a pass on that. Much because if that's a parade, then regular Halloween's a parade. I mean, it's kind of stretching the number. And again, a marathon, you know, this is gray area too. Is it a parade? Especially if you're going to have 1,000 people, you're going to have to stagger the run over time. And again, the conversation we had earlier today
And we
was...
close the street, correct?
What?
For a marathon, we close the street.
Well, it depends. This is going to
We
be off
hold,
and
yeah,
on.
we hold it up for a little while until the start is through and then reopen.
Well, and you know, I don't think it's so onerous to have somebody say, you know, we want the street closed from X time to X time. Here's the map, and this is what our, you know, our requirements are. And, you know, so
I'm not having a disagreement with this. I'm just
Right.
trying to figure out the shape and the form it's going to
Right.
take. I mean, you know, in the past, we've given certain passes to certain events and saying this is okay and this isn't. When I hear a definition that we sponsor Halloween and that Uber is a parade now, Halloween is a parade, then I start seeing there's a little bit of
well,
you know,
the
gray.
Halloween, Uptown Halloween has music, you know, stages.
So the
and-
presence of music makes a difference. No, it's closing the streets that makes a difference.
That's the
We're back to closing the streets. Every time you have to close the streets, you guys have to do it.
Right.
You just, and I understand that, because you'd rather have a nice set parameters of how to make that determination. I think when I was first on council, I think they were trying that street luge down Richland Avenue Bridge, Oxbow Bridge, which did not pass. But I found that, you know, that's something new and different too. So that would not be a parade. I guess it would be actually street closing a special event.
We have nice curbs to keep you in the luge now, though, you know. My thought is that tonight was a lot of information to present at one time, and it seems that it kind of needs to percolate. We went through some specifics and some concerns, and maybe going back to...
Yeah, I will work on these, the small questions that Ron asks.
This is, I'm just trying to figure more process for my own well-being here. So process-wise, we'll develop the form and the worksheet and do all the legwork at the front end when a person requests a special event. And then once that's done, then with that information, it would come to council.
No, it would only come to council
So council wouldn't be approving, be doing
That's
closures
not what
anymore.
Lisa said. So,
That's, council needs to do closures.
okay, well, that may be, I mean, the idea is to keep it, I mean, it's ridiculous that we have 16 ordinances for these
Gotcha.
things. And so maybe what needs to happen is a concurrent section needs to be changed. And I will
Yeah,
work
so-
with Lisa on that, because Paula and I worked on this, and those questions didn't come up either, so.
So if it meets all the needs of the service safety director and the service safety director's office, and the city can pull it off, and
Yeah.
it comes to council and says, this is approved, just an
As a
informational
special-
thing.
as a
This is
special permit.
This is a special permit. that was
It would never have to
approved by-
come before council.
Exactly.
It's a permit. I mean, we don't,
So that would save you a lot of
Yeah.
time reading all these ordinances.
I mean, and the idea is that everybody goes through the same process, and, you know, it's all together. And so we have to identify whether street closings needs to be fixed, and look for problems with other things in the code, so.
Okay.
Okay. So, and when people read this, you know, I did send it out last week, but with our new process, maybe not everybody got to see it. So, you know, shoot me those emails, and I will work with Lisa on identifying these ideas and questions that we have. So, Steve?
Can I just say one last thing? I mean, in thinking about this now this way, that this is a permit, and, you know, it would be no different than, well, different, yeah, a permit for someone who wants to bend on Court Street, that, you know, that, again, council doesn't see those.
Right.
But in some ways, I mean, if this is 30 days getting a reply back from the service safety director, this is even faster than it is for going through council, to get council approval. So
Yeah.
this is kind of I think this could be, there's some real efficient qualities to having something like this done, which is a positive to anyone who's holding an event, thinking, wow, I don't have to wait 6 weeks.
Well, and there's a checklist. I mean, some of
Plus.
the cities, they have a checklist, and, it's 2 pages, and I have models like that and such too. So it's not like reinventing the wheel. Yes.
So, for clarification, this might be part of the bigger discussion. Would this move events and the process into the executive branch, yay or nay, or would the legislative branch still have say? Is that one of the things you were alluding to, Steve? Would the legislative branch still have say in what's happening with said event?
It's now become an administrative process
Because of the ordinance.
because of the
Well,
ordinance.
On appeal,
Except for
it
the
could get
appeal.
to
That's
the
where,
legislative, yeah.
on an appeal, if somebody is denied, they can come before city council.
Yeah.
But, personally, I always thought, having all these ordinances for these, that's always seems to be administrative, because you're
Yeah.
dealing with the,
Sure.
law director and the chief of police and everything. So I think that right now it's split. It's kind of all over the place, and you have certain things happening with the safety, and then we have the street closers, and then we moved the glass bottle bill. We did something, so now we really don't have to talk about that. So it's all really quite confusing. We were confused last week about some of it. So.
Kind of going back to our idea of EPW, so we're putting something here in the service safety realm that really, from a legislative point of view, as long as everything's laid out, that can happen at your office.
Could I request that we look at the other cities that have model permits like this? Because it is I think, a rather large policy issue kind of question, that you're taking it solely out of or not solely, it's a combination, yes, right now where we work with city service safety, but you're looking at it becoming an administrative as opposed to a combination administrative legislative. And so there's relatively
some of these larger-
little input then
Right.
on what happens or doesn't happen on the city
And
streets.
probably these larger cities actually have a department that actually handles that, I assume. Like a Cincinnati probably has a person who deals with those kinds of things.
But I would be interested to see if it still goes through their councils.
That's a good thing to look at. Again, I'm a little bit thrown off by the fact that you would not be having any say in this. And I say that because, we had the JPAC cookout on Park Place there, and I know there was one resident there who was not aware of it till the very last minute when the hamburgers are out there. The other scenario is that somebody in your neighborhood decides to have a block party and does not inform you. It doesn't go through council. And some weekend you wait. What?
I mean, they can do that now. I mean, they can have a block party.
No, they can't have a block party. They can't close a street.
Right.
Okay, they close a street, you're not aware of it, their neighbors aren't aware of it, they've paid the insurance, they've gone through the process, the barricades go up, the party starts.
So you're saying because it goes through council that all of a sudden everybody knows about it?
Well, you got 3 readings, it's transmitted on
Well,
TV.
yes. So.
It becomes an ordinance that's posted in the paper. There's a little bit more awareness than administratively just having us do this on the side. And true, we'll have all the pieces and, all the pieces in place, I'm sure, but I'm just trying to, again, finding out how this will work, so I don't wake up tomorrow and Mary Street's got a block party and I didn't know about it, nobody invited me. Okay. But I think it's a good idea. I like the standardization. I know we have to look at the numbers in terms of what the costs are. And again, every time you close the streets, it costs. Even a parade's a cost. If you have to put a cop at that corner, even if they are, leapfrogging ahead of the parade, it's still a dollar amount that's involved. So yes, I'm glad you're working on this. Again, I'm just trying to figure out where it stops and starts, the parameters.
I just quickly Googled, now that we have our new situations here, and it seems that cities, it goes back and forth, but it seems that there is some conversation about things going through city council, but maybe that may be more as a commentary, like you bring it forward, we have all our ducks in a row, but whether there's actual legislation, it sounds like there's a conversation going on in council for sure.
Well, you could bundle all the requirements into one permit and say, we approve this, this closure and permit, or this permit with all the attributes of that permit, whether it's sound,
Right.
glass-free, closure of the street, et cetera. I mean, that's what you're saying. You've got 4 different ordinances just to run something through.
Well, and it seems right now that the 4 ordinances, I mean, they don't really talk to health and safety so much as like making sure that they have enough police or security and some of those other, I mean, one of the 4 is always, saying we don't care about our noise ordinance. Well, I think that if the fairgrounds was renting out their institution, the grounds over there every weekend, you bet that wouldn't be, like, oh, every weekend we're having, big rager parties over there. So, that's something that.
I live on the west side. Sometimes I hear the noise and I don't even know what's going on.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you both for your work on this and Law Director Eliason. Do we have any other items for planning and development?
Oh, there's
Just
some.
to bring it up,
Yeah.
public
bring it
master
up.
plan.
Yeah.
There's
Tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, 6:30 at the community center. Public meeting for the Ohio University Master Plan. Open house starts at 6:30, presentation at 7:30, open house at 8. That's the 14th, that's tomorrow. The 15th, of course, at 11:30 at Nelson Reception Hall. There'll be a duplication of it. So we have 2 opportunities to see what the master plan is.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to Finance and Personnel Committee with Councilmember Reisner as chair.
Thank you, Madam President. Actually, I only have one item on my agenda. It's generally just called computer purchases. Apparently, there's some confusion about where to draw the money from a computer that was bought for the fire department. And following the threads, the conversation that went between the City Service Safety Director and the auditor and others, there's some concern about if the police department also has adequate funding in their account for computer purchases. And recently, council, as we are all aware of, purchased.
eBay.
Well, I'm not getting to that. You want to run this? May I proceed? Okay. We purchased 7 small laptops up here for a total of $867. The idea that it was just simply going to be taken out of supply rather than out of the computer fund line. But there seems to be some disagreement with the auditor's office about it, so would you care to speak to it?
Essentially, it's considered a capital item, and therefore should be coming out of the TC 500s. There's always a question whether there's a dollar amount or actually the aspect of what things are being purchased. I believe it's actually the Athens Police Department rather than Fire Department. They're requesting several computers, I believe, and originally they were going to pull it out of their supply line, I believe, and the recommendation is you take it out of. Is it? No, wait a second. You might be right. It is.
That's Fire Department. That's where it started.
Fire Department Station 2 computer. That was actually one that passed recently. Went through it as a supply. Occasionally, these things sneak through. Essentially, what you're seeing, there's services like licensing as well as hardware.
Right.
They're trying to keep them track of one versus the other.
Yes.
If I understand, we do need to probably. We probably have enough money in the capital, I suspect, but we want to probably eventually replenish it if need be. Or else take it out of internal services, I guess. Is that where I'm hearing? So we're talking about maybe spending, what, $5,000 is it? For internal services, appropriating some money for that. I think we have about $12,000 in the unappropriated balance, somewhere in that range. Not a lot. But again, the alternative would be move money from point A to point B, which could be done as well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think the consistent is the auditor wants the money to be coming from the computer supply line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which again is
So-
internal services.
Yeah, so if there's no money there, you can't purchase the hardware from the supply line. money needs to be moved into the computer.
Okay, so
line.
you're saying that even though you would have money in the supply line, if there's no money for you in
the
computer,
TC500s.
in the TC500, that you can't get it, even though
Until you get
technically it's there, but it hasn't been moved over.
You can move money between the 200s, 300s.
Right.
That's supplies and services. You can't really move money out of the TC100s personnel into TC200s, 300s, nor can you move anything into the TC500s, transaction class 500s, which are capital.
Right.
In fact, the same thing applies with the 600s, which are refund. I think just last week you passed $100 just to be able to reimburse some application fees. It requires an act of council.
Right.
So the idea would be to move that money to the appropriate accounting fund line.
Okay.
Okay?
So we can get an ordinance together for
Yes.
next Monday to
We can probably do that. That
move the
should be
money
an
around.
acceptable.
But on a larger issue here, the computers up here, I think, have an average cost of about $85.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I can understand in the days when computers were relatively they were very expensive in real terms and rare, and people wanted to keep an eye on them and make sure they didn't walk out the door and so on. And I understand why that would be. But today, the costs are getting so low and they're so ubiquitous that it's almost like buying a ream of paper or a photocopier module to make copies. So are we behind in our thinking about how we're funding these, or should we look at a different way, make it easier?
I wouldn't know how to address that. I mean, I always thought a dollar amount would be the determining factor, but then there's a question of use versus, it is an object that can disappear, and therefore it should have some kind of inventory capability. But I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
we have a state audit, and doesn't there are generally accepted accounting procedures, GAAP, and then there are also the auditor's recommendations, so those might help with guidelines for us. So that would be
I'm
worth
just tossing
checking.
ideas out there. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have an answer, and I don't have a solution for it.
And that
but
may be where the auditor's comment is coming from, because of
I'm
those
just wondering,
procedures.
what happens when computers come down to about $10? Remember when calculators, I am so old.
I know.
Okay, I had a calculator that I purchased in 1974. It cost me $119, and it only added, subtracted, multiplied, divide. That was it. Okay, $104. Now you get them in a box of cereal for nothing. I mean, your insurance agent hands them out as a business card, and they do 50,000 different functions. Now, I'm asking then, we're not keeping track of calculators anymore, are we?
No.
We don't do that.
No.
Okay. Now, when computers get down to this size and they cost $10, do we still do this? I mean, do we still say, well, it's a computer. We have to have a separate line for that because it's unique or exotic.
On the other hand, if we're trying to work our way through, and again, part of the discussion that needs to happen with the auditor, of course, is the allocation formula. The allocation formula is actually derived from computers and cars for the internal services.
Yeah, good point.
So therefore, to keep track of what we're talking about, and again, it's easy for you to say, yes, that's $80, but each of you had a consultant coming in just early before the meeting to how to set this thing up, I believe, right? And that consultant was Scott.
We still need a human.
Yeah.
We still need
So there's a cost on that.
Fortunately, he's on the payroll, too.
Fortunately, he's on the payroll. Fortunately, he's not coming out of internal services either. He's coming out of another fund entirely. But you can see where this keeping track,
Of course.
has a value.
Yes.
Okay, and I've worked in departments at OU where they have a guesstimate of how many computers are out there, 100, and really it's close to 300, and the poor IT person keeps telling them that it's a lot more work these days. But you can see where this inventory might be necessary.
Remember, Steve?
Okay. Just to kind of go back to what President Nisley was saying, and I think this is important, is it's accountancy. At the end of the day, it's accountancy with the taxpayers' dollars. And that's, if it's a $10 calculator or a $10 phone or whatever, it was the taxpayers' dollars that went into to purchase that item. So, I mean, you have to have accountancy any way you look at it. It's plain and simple. That's what's being asked for.
Well, I think it's being accounted, though, in the supplies anyway. You have a PO, you generate it, there's a record of it. I mean, it's not like you just magically appears, you cut a check. It goes through the process. So there's a paper trail that goes all the way back from beginning to end. So I don't think we're losing track of an item or losing account of it.
Is it a disposable item? Is it like soap for the washing, for the hand soap, or is it just, I mean, they're all, as you say, the calculators, had a Hewlett Packard reverse Polish enter. That you, as you say, you did get handed out at, as calling cards. But that's it. Is this a disposable item that's in front of you right now? Close, I know.
Yeah, close.
Yeah. Well, that's something to think about. Again, accounting would be, and from my point of view, the formulation and allocation is the other side of it too, because there is a support that's behind that computer at this point. And since you're talking about accountancy and transparency, I know you have some miscellaneous there. You could always talk about the checkbook thing that you received, right?
I could.
Josh Mandel wants us to know.
Other questions?
A checkbook?
Staff? Yes.
Miscellaneous?
Yes, we have a few.
Okay. Come forward.
Two things coming up. One is we'd like to get an increase of staff. We're going to have retirement at
In October.
In October. What would you? I don't know his position. He's actually
Our
supervisor.
sewer supervisor, our sewer sanitary and storm sewer supervisor is retiring in October.
And we'd like to actually initiate the add a staffing with the sunset for October, so we could hire somebody so there's continuity between the two. The gentleman's been around long enough. He has a lot of knowledge, and the idea is to pass it along as best possible. So we'd ask for a bump up in the staffing for that. We'll get you the numbers and the timetable. The hope is that we could get somebody hired by August with the idea that it'll overlap at least to October. Yeah, but to authorize you still need the staffing authorization. What's the other item I forget?
We'd like to seek authorization to enter into contract with Athens Hocking Recycling Center.
Oh, yes, okay, yes. We extended our sanitation, garbage, and recycling contract for 2 years now. We want to really formalize that and roll it over for probably 3. There's a question, of course, whether we had to put out the bid or not. I think the conversation evolved that they're not totally unentangled with the waste district at this point. So therefore, they're still a government entity because they're actually using county employees, and we'd like to get that formalized so at least we have a clear sailing. And just to add a little bit to the flavor of that, I ran to Roger Bale 3 days ago. He was under the impression I was going to be around till the end of 2016, which made him very disappointed because we're going to be up for our policy plan, the strategic planning for the solid waste district. It's a 5-year plan. It's coming up again. So just be aware of the fact that it will require involvement of the city as an entity. So put that in the back of your minds. What will have to happen there is how we strategically move forward for the next 5 years after that. Not that we're really up to pace now, but we're getting there. So really the whole thing is to enter into contract with the solid waste, Athens Hocking Recycling Center.
Yes.
And again, that's a good chunk of money that we spend every year to get it. But the fact is they've been doing a good job for us so far.
Yeah, and the big push with this contract, and just so that we get it on the record, because we can't start educating too early, is the conversion to single stream recycling in the city, residential and business.
And I know at the staff level, we've been having discussions about doing some public awareness for the out-of-sight trash cans. How to go about doing that, of course, will be another issue as well, because we always have a new population every year, or at least a quarter of them new.
Anyone have questions on what we just heard?
No. But I have a question about the police, since there's been so much buzz in the press here lately with the yearly report that Chief Pyle brought out and his, I don't know the words I want to use, I guess he's low on staff, or he has staff positions that need to be filled, and people have been asking questions about that. Is someone off on leave for sickness or injury, or What's the reference there?
We've had several retirements. We have had transitions over time. It takes a while to actually vet a pool. We have to actually put it out there, do a civil service test,
Right.
do a whole series of testing. It's at least 6 months to get somebody on board. So there's always some downtime in that. Remember the K-9 units quit
Right.
end of the year?
Right.
Dave Williams earlier last year. So we have had that rollover in time. It takes time to do that.
So it's really, they're working on filling those positions.
If there's, yes, by law, if on union contracts, if there's an open position, we have to fill it. We have to at least start the process within, I think, 90 days or something like that. It's kind of fuzzy because I don't really look at the contracts as well as I should, because I read them and forget them pretty quickly.
But I think my point to the general public or out there, it made it sound like we were down positions and we as council either weren't filling those positions or whatever. That's not what this is. This is, we're trying to get the people trained to be in those positions and hire in those
Yes,
positions.
it takes time. You require a physical test as well as a background, pretty extensive background test, and then there's always the training point. So yeah, it takes it's you know we're look at the budget. It's about a quarter of the general fund at this point, right? So we spend the money for it. We spend as much as we can. So we work at it, but again, it takes it's all. Most of these things do take time.
Right. Is it like 6 months sometimes to get a police officer up and ready?
To have them out on the street by themselves, yes.
That's after they're hired.
Yeah, after they're hired.
Right. So it takes probably 90 days to even get them hired?
No, more than that.
More than that.
Yeah.
But from their first day, minimum of 6 months before they're ready to hit the street on their own.
And even after that, after coming out of the academy and coming here, they still aren't on foot patrol on their own or in their own cruiser. So that's still, you're looking at manpower to where you've got to have someone who's supervising that individual until they've gone through the probationary period, and then they graduate and they're able to go. So it's long. Fire is even longer. Fire is a year plus in order to get a firefighter.
So I think that's what I'm trying to bring out here is this educational component to the public to understand that when somebody retires, I mean, to get that position filled. Now, can we do other things like we're doing with the sewer? I don't know, where you can bring someone in, and do some overlap if that's, if that's important. But
there have been times we did that. I think we had bumped it one lieutenant, I think, at one point, if my memory's correct. That could be fire, that could be police. But we try doing that when possible. Again, it depends on how much money we have in the TC-100s to actually augment that extra person for the duration.
Right.
And I'm kind of fuzzy on it. I'd have to defer to my human resource director for this, but as far as I understand, you have to actually put out a notice to get applicants in. You have to test for that pool. You have to vet that pool. And we sometimes have, if we get a pool of applicants, they're good for a couple of years, but you realize that there's a demand for that, and therefore they're not always going to be there, in a year or two. So then you have to redo that, go to the Civil Service Commission, have that vetted in terms of how it works. There's a lot of steps in the process. It does take longer than we'd like, but we want good officers whenever possible.
Okay.
Anything else? I have nothing else.
Thank you, Councilmember Reiser. We'll consider the meeting adjourned at 8:48 p.m. Thank you very much.